It's the worst.
Hello, hello. I am also so sorry. I just realized there was an email stuck in my outbox to you that had like the Zoom link and a little bit more info. And I was like, oh my gosh, it never actually got sent to her.
Well, I didn't
Uh,
read the whole thing. I only saw the Zoom link.
yeah, I think it just got kind of stuck in my outbox. So thank you for hopping on today and being here.
Yeah,
I'm very excited to meet you and get to connect with you today. I
you too.
was very fascinated by your background and your story, which is very different than mine and how I grew up. And I always aim and want to talk to people with different experiences because that's what's going to bring richness and fullness to all of our lives. So, to kick things off, if you just want to give a little hi, hello, your name, who you are, where you're from, and then we can dive into the topics that I would love to hear more about if that works for you.
Yeah, sure. That sounds great. When I found out the name of your podcast was Welcome to My Tent, I thought that's a very cool name. I love the idea of giving voices to people who maybe necessarily you don't hear from a lot. And also, you know, engaging with people that may have completely different experiences or opinions or viewpoints. I think that's something we're really missing in our world is giving people like the benefit of the doubt that they come to their conclusions based on their own experiences. And if we were to understand each other better, then a lot of the time we wouldn't have, I think, so much division.
I 100% agree. Like
Mm.
I'm a big believer if you sat down with anybody for 10 minutes, you could find something pretty quickly probably that connects you in some way, whether that's things you like, don't like. We're more alike than we're not. I just think that a lot of times people won't even give someone a chance based on how they look, their background, what they do for a living, where they came from. And it's been really cool to get to talk to a bunch of people. And even within your profile, and we'll definitely get into this, like hearing the word sex work, even for sometimes for me, I'm like, oh, like that, that's a topic, that's a thing, that's
Mhm.
taboo. And even kind of challenging, like I've never spoken to someone before that has had an experience with that. So I think even challenging our own initial, like, oh, that we can't talk about that. We can't do that. It's been really fascinating to have people open up. And I'm very honored that you're willing to share so much of you because I think it gives people just so much more understanding. So I am amped to have this conversation and hear
That's so
everything
funny
that you
you
have
say
to
that
say.
because I think the word sex is difficult for a lot of people to even
Yes,
to
in
say it out
general.
loud. My children even like when they were growing up, I tried to really normalize it so that they would feel comfortable to talk to me about sex. And every time I would say the word sex, all three of my children did the same thing. They were at a certain age where they'd be like, Mom, don't
Yeah.
say that. Don't say that.
And you're like, it's a word. It's just a word. And
Yes.
that's sort of, I think, what it's comes down to is like why some words over others put
Mhm.
such a stigma or assumption about
Mhm.
what that entails. And it's funny too, because that also just is like the sex of a person, like
Yeah.
it has a lot of different connotations. So I
It
completely
shows
agree.
how powerful words are. It really
Mhm.
does. Incredible.
Agree. Agree.
And how much power they have.
Yeah. And yeah, I could not agree more. So Annie Temple, this is Annie Temple, everyone, listeners. Welcome
Hi.
into the tent. I'm super excited to have you here. So first off, like where are you from? Maybe a little bit of background. I know that you have quite the journey and story of growing up, but where are you currently in the world?
Sure. So I live in Canada on the West Coast, Surrey, BC, British Columbia. That's
Okay.
the province.
So like the Vancouver side of things.
Yes, very close
Okay.
to Vancouver. Very close.
Okay.
And where
Cool.
are you? I didn't even think to ask you that.
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh,
I've been kind of all over. I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut. I lived in New York. I lived in Chicago for quite a long
wow.
time. And then we moved out here in 2021 after we had my son, because my mom's down here. And it's funny, I'm an adult, I have a child, and I was like, Mom, help. I don't know. What do I
I
do?
know. It's nice to be
SOS.
close to family.
Yeah, so we're here in Phoenix and we really, really love it. But it is really fascinating, like once you have children to realize like no one knows what they're doing. No one knows what's going on.
I
No
know.
one knows how to do this.
I know.
Kind of crazy. So you have three kids, you said.
Yes, I do.
Okay. How old?
Yes, my oldest is 24, my daughter is 24, and I have an 18-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter.
Okay. Okay. So you run the gamut there of a lot of different phases for them too, which is
Definitely.
interesting.
And none of them were planned, so they're very far apart.
That's kind of the most fun though. It's like maybe not planned, but
hmm
what
I
a
knew I
welcome
wanted children.
surprise.
I just didn't mean to have them at those exact moments, but
Do
it was,
you
of course, a blessing.
do you feel now like in hindsight, like that was always what it was supposed to be and they're the ones? Yeah. Yeah.
hmm I feel like in hindsight of everything that I've been through, that there was a purpose and a reason. And that's made it a lot easier when new situations come up that I can handle them because I think, okay, this really sucks right now, but there's a purpose and a reason. And
Yeah,
it's
if we
just,
can't see it now, it will come
hmm
out in hindsight. Okay, so let's backtrack a little because you
Sure.
mentioned you've been through a lot, and I feel like
Yeah.
that's just scratching the surface of everything. So,
Okay.
growing up in kind of childhood and how you were raised, what did that look like for you, and what were some of those experiences that have definitely shaped you into the person that you are today? What did that look like on that
Sure.
front?
So I actually had, even though I was very poor, my family was very poor as a child, and I had a father with alcoholism. I did have a very stable, strong mother.
Mm,
She was, I mean, I felt like my life was totally normal, and I didn't feel like I had a difficult upbringing in any
mm,
way. During my upbringing, I was just like, this is normal life. Uh, but the poverty, that was normal life too, but I didn't want to always be poor.
mm,
And there came a time when I left my small town that I grew up in, which was Kelowna, BC, Kelowna, British Columbia. And I left my small town to move to the big city. As soon as I got here, and I'm still in the big city area, as soon as I got here, I realized how difficult it was to support myself financially. When I was closer to my family and my friends, there was always someone with a meal or a care package. It was just a lot easier. I didn't have to pay cover charge to get into a bar. Going out to eat wasn't as expensive. Everything was just less
yeah.
expensive. And I came to the big city with like not a lot of work experience. I had waitressed in restaurants, but they were really small, kind of mom and pop restaurants. So I didn't really have the experience that they were looking for in the big, busy restaurants that were downtown. And I lived right down. Well, when I moved down here, I stayed with my brother, and he was living right in the West End. So in that area, I walked around and handed out resumes and finally got a job as a leather jacket salesperson on like a really the main street of Vancouver. And it was minimum wage at that time. That was $7 an hour. We're talking 1996.
Yeah,
Like,
which,
yeah.
but still, that's a wage that's difficult to
hmm
support yourself on.
Yeah. And I was only working part-time. So I was really struggling, like really struggling. I couldn't feed myself very well. I stole some of my food, especially cheese and razors. Those were the things that I was always like, why are these so expensive?
Yeah,
But I can't live without them.
right. That's like a
Um,
cheese. I get the cheese thing. Yes, like
mhm.
cheese is life. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. So I had a girlfriend who was an exotic dancer at the time, but I'd never really considered doing it myself. But there came a point after about a month or two of living in Vancouver that I was just so desperate. I hated my job in retail, absolutely hated it. Just standing for hours and hours, and no one would come into the store, and it was so boring. And I'm a busy person. I'm the kind of person that I could work for minimum wage if I'm busy all day because I won't
Right.
even be thinking about it, you know.
Yeah.
But but working for minimum wage to do nothing. I mean, I couldn't even work for $1,000 an hour to do nothing because I would
Yeah.
go insane. I can't just sit still, I can't do nothing. So struggling financially, stealing my food, barely being able to pay my rent, and no one else would hire me. I couldn't find another job. So I decided to try dancing. And my girlfriend, who was an exotic dancer or stripper, she gave me the phone numbers of some of the agencies, but I didn't tell her I was going to do it. I didn't tell anybody. I just looked at the piece of paper that she had given me, and the very first number I phoned, and I went to the agency. Well, I phoned and they said, well, come on in and let us have a look at you.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does that mean? Like, am I gonna have to take off my clothes in their office? Like, I had no idea what was gonna happen when I got there. But when I got there, they just, I don't know what they were looking for, but he just said, okay, yeah, sure, you can start dancing. You're gonna need, this, and this. And I was like, well, I have no money. I
Yeah.
basically needed like costumes and music and shoes, things to do the tools of the trade.
Yeah.
So he said, well, you can start by VIP dancing or private dancing, which at that time was very new to Vancouver, but it involved you didn't need anything special. Wear some heels and a tight little dress, and off you go. So I went to the Marble Arch that night, that exact same night, and had my very first night of VIP dancing. And what that involved at that time was there was like this little stage off to the side in the bar, and there was some chairs around it, and it was in complete view of everybody in the bar. It was
Yeah.
called,
So,
yeah, it was a
yeah.
VIP show, and the selling feature was that it was up close and personal instead of like when, most of us were on stages and you just sit and watch and you didn't get to talk. So now you get to talk, you get to interact, and that was the selling feature. So my very first time stripping was on this tiny little stage in front of like a customer that I had walked up to his table. And because I was new and it was my first night, a lot of people uh, were happy to like help me make my first night successful. And that night,
Yeah.
in like I think 3 or 4 hours, I made almost $300. And that was more than I made in 2 weeks at my retail
Right.
job. So
Yeah.
it was just so like, wow. I was so happy.
Well, yeah, that's like a 180. You're like, what sort of was like the emotional thing after that first night? Because that seemed to all happen kind of quickly. You called the
Mhm.
number, you win, and they were like, off you go. You're like, what? And then all of a sudden you have $300. And
Yes.
that's what was that transition? Because that feels
Oh,
pretty night and day.
it
Yeah.
was. It was. I mean, I remember like I still feel like I can remember and smell the air and like feel the sweat on my skin as I rollerbladed up the hill, up Davie Street to go to the agency, to meet the agent, not knowing what I was getting into, not to having told anyone where I was going. And
And
just
on
like
rollerblades, which I
yeah,
love.
the fear, but also like the determination that I needed to do something and change something and fix my life. And then it was my one day off, and the next day I was supposed to go back to work at the retail store, and I didn't want to go back there. So I wanted to find out today, can I do this? I need to know if I can do this right now. So that's why I went immediately that night. And after work, after I counted my money and went home, I was just like, I was just vibing with energy and happiness. And I had two roommates at the time. And the next morning, I, well, next afternoon, I think I slept till noon.
Yeah. The next,
I,
whatever, 12 hours later. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I invited my roommates out for breakfast, and my treat. And so that was very empowering. And I was so nervous. And back then we didn't have cell phones. I was too nervous to call my work. I was supposed to go to work that day, and I was like, should I just not show up, or what should I do? I don't know what to do, but I'm not going. I'm quitting. But I was nervous to call and quit. I was like
Yeah.
23 years old. And I stopped at a payphone on the way to the restaurant. We're walking to the restaurant. And I phoned and I said, yeah, I'm not coming into work today or ever
Ever. Yeah.
or ever.
Or the
And
next, or the
yeah.
next.
just send my paperwork. You have my address because I didn't even want to go in again. I was just, it was an incredible relief.
Hmm.
And I felt very empowered and very
Yeah.
excited. Yeah.
Yeah, which is great to hear because I'd also be curious, especially as you work there for longer periods. Like, I am sure there's a lot of judgment and misconception about dancers, sex workers, people that do this. And for you, I think it's important to hear like this was an empowering thing for you to do where you grew up. Yes, you had stability, but like you knew that you wanted something more for yourself. And
Mhm.
you went out there and you did it. But I feel a lot of times in society, if someone was to go and open up a retail store, that would be applauded. And someone going and dancing, that would be a little, ooh. So,
Mhm.
what were some of the things you experienced when you started telling people, if people did know? And like, what are some of those misconceptions that you felt or feel are important to kind of talk about? Because I love that it was empowering for you. I love that you were like, yes, badass, I did that. I can take my
Mhm.
friends out to breakfast. I can breathe. I
Yes,
can live. I can feed myself. Like
exactly.
that's
Oh,
life changing. That is a
yes,
life changing thing. And I think
totally.
that should be just as applauded as someone that,
And
is in
I think
corporate.
that many, maybe most, probably most sex workers, that is the feeling and that is the reason. I mean, I don't want to say that money is the only reason that people get into the sex industry because once you're in it, and I'm sure there are people who get in it for other reasons, but I think the majority of us get into it for the money because it's so stigmatized that
Mhm.
we're afraid what will happen when we get into the industry. Will our family disown us? Like, uh, will anyone ever want to date me? Am I going to be alone forever? It's so many things that might go through your head, but usually it's out of financial pressure or stress that you get into the industry. And then the feeling of relief and of empowerment that you get is so incredible. And so for you to acknowledge that, I want to thank you because
Yeah.
I feel like that goes very unacknowledged. And it's a huge part of why sex workers get into the industry, stay in the industry, or return to it, because that's a huge theme for almost every sex worker I know, and myself included.
Interesting.
Yeah, we
Interesting.
leave the industry, we try to go straight, we try to get back into the square word, and often, and 8, 9 times out of 10, we'll go back to the sex industry.
That's fascinating. That's like
Yeah.
fascinating. And is it because of that intense empowerment and
Mhm.
community? Because I know that within your line of work, you have built a community of people who have helped heal you in
Mhm.
so many ways and push you and protect you and help you do so many other things that maybe growing up you never felt would be a possibility, whether that's education,
Absolutely.
whether that's more opportunity. So is it sort of a dual thing of empowerment? Money is, we all love money. We'll call a spade.
Hmm.
But paying your rent's great. But is it also the people that you're
Yes.
surrounded by?
Yeah,
Amazing.
you nailed it. It is the people as well, depending on like what part of the industry you work in. For me, starting out as a dancer, because we worked together every week in the different clubs, we've developed a lot of camaraderie. We're in these tiny little change rooms by like just a few of us and get to know each other over the course of the week. And there can be friction too, but usually by the end of the week, everybody's friends.
Yeah, that's
But
life
like
though. That's
nobody understands you like other dancers understand you or at that time. Like that was just something nobody really could relate to what we went through. And so we would sit in the change rooms, we could talk about anything. We could say anything. There's no taboo in a strip club change room, which is something that I loved because I've always been a person who's pretty open and even before I was a dancer. So then becoming a dancer and working in the sex industry for years now, I got nervous being in situations where I have to like use etiquette and I'm like, oh no, my mouth, what if I say something, because I'm so, excuse me, I'm so uh like my culture is the sex industry. And so to be around regular world, it's just not,
Normies, yeah.
yeah,
To be
normies.
around normies,
We
normal.
call them civilians.
That's amazing. That's
I know,
amazing.
it's hilarious.
I get that though, but it's
Hmm.
all we are shaped by our experience. And we can only have one. Like the only experience we can have is ours.
Hmm.
And the worldview that we get is shaped by whatever we've experienced and that. And what were some of the things that, because of that community, you were then able to go forth and do? Obviously, you're building relationships. Like friendship in itself is an extremely important thing for humans to have
Hmm.
human to human connection. But I know that this has pulled you into now where you are speaking, writing,
Yeah.
connecting. Like, how did that kind of happen for you? And what did that
Hmm.
look like as you're kind of like moving along through dancing and then like adding in all of these other things? Like, what was that like?
Interestingly, it was because I was raised as a feminist by a feminist, and I found myself back in university, I was dancing, but I went back to school because I wanted my mom to accept me again because my mom took it really hard when I
Mm,
became a dancer, like really
I was
hard.
going to ask, yeah, how that
Yeah, so
dynamic
there
played
was
out.
like a lot of, not a lot, most of my friends were fine, but my family, my mom, my stepdad weren't they were not supportive at all.
Mm,
And I had a younger brother at the time who I think was influenced by my parents and was very disappointed in me. But my brother, who I'd lived with briefly in Vancouver, he was fine with it. He accepted it. My biological father, he accepted it. It was, not that big a deal, but mostly I think my mom was embarrassed.
mm,
It was she always had a thing about wanting to like make sure we did what she felt was right. I don't want to call her controlling because it sounds mean, but she was controlling. I love
yeah.
her, okay? But she was controlling it. She did try to control her life. And so to have an adult child that was living in a way that embarrassed her, I feel like that she just didn't want anyone to find out or to know.
Mm,
So that didn't bode very well when a few years later my face is splashed across newspapers everywhere. But how that happened is I went back to university to make my mother happy, and I was taking women's studies classes, but I wanted to write my papers about how I was empowered by the sex industry. I was surrounded by very vocal feminists who opposed sex work and uh, basically saw like women who work in the sex industry as traitors. We're
what?
perpetuating rape culture. We're part of the problem. It's very like second wave feminism type of attitudes. And it was very strong back then. That's like we're talking 1997-ish, 1998, around then. And so I hadn't found my voice yet. I was just this exotic dancer sitting in a women's studies class, listening to other women rant about how terrible the sex industry is and sex workers are. And I thought,
When they've never been in it.
no, they'd never been in it. Yeah.
Right. So like that's where I think the massive disconnect is like I
Yes.
don't really think you can speak about something unless you've done it. Like
And
I
that is a criticism of feminist theory and feminism in general, historically, because the more privileged voices are the voices that you hear first. So you heard the middle class and upper class white women's voices before you heard anyone else's voices. And some of them want to be allies and want to help. And so then they'll speak on behalf of others, and they'll often get it wrong. And in
mm-hmm.
the case of sex workers, I feel like many of them went beyond wanting to save us. Like, because if you want to save someone, then you'll listen to them. You'll listen to what they have to say. And if they say, listen, you don't need to save me, I'm okay, I like what I'm doing, then you would listen. But a lot of feminists went beyond that to make sex workers feel like we we are too degraded and too exploited to know what's best for ourselves. And so we needed other people to make those decisions for us. And that still goes on today. I mean, it's crazy. You know, a lot of people think that sex work is the same as sexual exploitation and
Hmm.
human sex trafficking, and those are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. The difference is consent. The difference is age of consent. You know, so we have so many laws. Every country has laws that deal with exploitation and kidnapping and forced sexual, you know, situations. We have so many laws for all of that, and we don't need extra laws specifically for sex workers. And by having those extra laws just for specifically for sex workers, it's like you're saying that, first of all, sex work is different from all those other things. And
Yeah.
second of all, that sex workers don't can't be covered by the same law, like can't be protected by the same laws as everyone else. And so we have to have special laws that protect us, but they don't actually protect us. They actually push us further underground. They push us more into situations where we are less safe, unfortunately.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
And what's ringing in my head too is when you're saying like we don't need protection, is that stat that you were saying that what 80-90% of people will come back
mhm,
because they love it and they want
yes.
to. And like
Yeah.
that is just such a clear like
Mhm,
indication to me that like if they didn't want to be there or come back, like it's the coming back
mhm.
thing. Like that's the biggie to me is like
Yeah.
once you're out, unless you want to go back to something, that's your, choice. I mean, pending
Mhm.
situation, but
Yeah.
that's the stat that just like is really again coming back to me where I'm like, I don't know why it should be valued as different. So you're in college
Yeah.
and all
And I
these
was so
people
lucky,
are
like,
like, uh, did they
yeah,
know at the
nobody
time?
knew. I was just
Okay.
like, I just
Yeah.
sat there thinking, oh my God, like this, what they're saying doesn't match my experience. And so I decided to write my first essay on my experience as an empowered exotic dancer. But I couldn't find any source materials to
Yeah.
support my argument. So So I went and I interviewed my colleagues. I interviewed
Okay.
my dancer colleagues and I wrote my essay and I looked up how to, use in the sources cited, how to cite first person interviews. And I did it all correctly. And I had it in my paper. And a few weeks later, everyone got their paper back but me. And I was asked to come and talk to my TA after class. And so
Oh.
I didn't know what she was going to do. I thought she might be wanting to host an intervention because this was a women's studies class, and,
All of a
and she's
sudden, like
like,
six more people come into the room and they're like, Annie, we need you to sit down. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
God.
So, but that wasn't it at all. She actually told me that Simon Fraser University, which was the university I was going to at the time, wouldn't accept my paper because of primary sources or something like that. I
Mm.
or no, not I don't know exactly how to say it now. It's been so many years, but basically, I had to find published sources.
Hmm.
I couldn't find my own. Couldn't use my own research. So she said, you can do the paper again. And I was like, but now what am I going to write about? And I can't find other sources. And she said, I know of a book. And she recommended a book called Whores and Other Feminists.
Oh,
Right?
I
There's
feel like
another
I
one of
should
the
read
words.
that. Yeah, that's a word. That's a word too, because I feel like that may be something that's tossed around that everyone, quote unquote, you're generalized. You know what I mean? You're
Mm,
all whores. You're all this.
yes.
You're all that. Um,
Whore
but
power.
right, horsepower. Love it. But so so you were able to then use that as source, and
Hmm.
then your
I wrote
paper
my
was able.
essay, and that book was just like it changed my entire world. It changed the entire trajectory of my life. I actually quit school and continued to dance. And then I started at that time, websites and starting websites was really new thing for people to
Yeah.
do. This was around 2000-ish. And I started a website for exotic dancers where we could share and exchange information with each other, because that was a real problem back then. Like, agents would lie to us about what we would find when we get to the bars, but then once you're there, you got to work, you need the money, like,
Yeah.
and we were really encouraged not to discuss our show. There's just so many taboos in the industry, and I wanted to create a space not only to give dancers a chance to like be more informed about their work, but also to give them permission to enjoy their work. Because until I'd read this material from other sex workers who also considered themselves feminists, I had thought that there was no theories that supported an empowered sex worker. And then it also made me realize that all of the stuff that I was being taught in university, all of the academia that, was, sex work is degrading, sex work is oppressive to women, all of the things that I was being taught were really just theories, and
Hmm.
that academia is, should be questioned, and it can't be just taken as fact, which before that, I had just taken everything I was told by universities, academia, that's fact. This is science. This is facts. And I'd never had that ability to critically think about that. I was great on the street. I mean, I didn't believe a thing anyone ever said to me,
Right.
but
Yeah.
when it came to this authority of university or academia, I didn't question it. And so that was a huge awakening for me to start to question not just, people in my life and just the street and business, et cetera, but academia as well. And then I thought, wow, this is so fascinating for me. And I can participate in academia now in a way that is reflective of my true experience. So I did get more involved years later, and still continue to do my own research that, gets benefits students in university now. So it's
There you
really awesome. And
go.
there is a school of thought, and there are instructors in the universities now who are teaching an empowered perspective for sex workers. And I've been invited to talk to classrooms and that kind of thing. So it is changing, and I think that's wonderful. But I feel like we still have a very uh, the industry is still very misunderstood, and
Hmm.
the laws are still working against us. So there's still a lot to do, and there's a lot of activism going on. But that book in particular, Whores and Other Feminists, which got me on the track to create that website, which is called The Naked Truth and is still around today. And that led me into meeting other sex worker activists and getting involved in all kinds of different activities at a political level, all the way down to like health and safety and different things like that. And ultimately led to me writing a book called Annie Temple's Business Bible for Erotic Entrepreneurs, which is basically a guide to how to start and run your own sex work business, be an independent sex worker, and with do it in a way to keep safe, keep healthy, and make money.
There you go.
Yeah.
That, see, and now you have the potential to be cited as a
Yes.
published source. That's a full circle moment. I
Mm.
mean, that is a wildly full circle moment to know that someone may be writing a paper and won't have it not be able to be submitted because they now have sources. They have
Yeah.
actual things. And this, I'm so appreciative of people who are so open about it. Would you say that the majority of people in the sex work industry are open, as open as you, less open than you?
Mm.
Like, what's the general?
I would say the majority, if they could hide their face, would express similar sentiments to me. Majority do not show their face. Ma- I would say the majority of people who work in the sex industry lead a double life, lie about
Mhm.
what they do, and are very fearful of being outed or being found out. And it's used against them. So you'll see like guys that hack into their computers and find out what their real name is and threaten to tell their parents, or, and it scares the shit out of them, and I feel like that's one of the privileges of being face out for me is no one can
Yeah.
ever threaten me that they're going to expose me. Expose what? I've already exposed it
Yeah.
all.
You've exposed yourself. You
Yeah, in every
have it.
way.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that kind of a piece of the empowerment too, that that's just kept you going and pushed you forward, like knowing that that may encourage someone else to be a little bit more empowered and forward facing and really embrace it. And it makes me sad that a lot of people feel like they still need to hide it because
Mm,
I think everyone deserves to live in a world that they feel safe to be who they are. And
I agree.
that must be really tough. I mean, that must be really, really hard.
It still is. I mean, it's still hard for me when I do these podcasts and I'll take the video and I'll cut clips out to share in my own social media. And I'll stop and think, what if my son sees this? What if my mother sees this? It's still, I'm 50 years old and I'm worried what my mother thinks.
I don't think that
So
ever really goes
it
away.
doesn't. It's so
Like,
weird.
nor does I think like the concern over our children. Because my mom's like, I worry about you every day. I'm almost
Mm,
35, and she's like, every single day, like I still worry about you. It doesn't really ever go away.
mm.
But speaking of kids, like how do you approach these kinds of topics with them? Are there things that like you've sort of had to navigate? Because like children at a certain age, it's some too much, I think, too big of a topic for them to comprehend until there's a little
Yeah.
bit. So how have you gone about that within
I mean,
parenting?
it's just like parenting. It's
Yeah.
trial and error
Yeah.
and like everything else with parenting I meant. But yeah, so I've mostly tried to be honest, but age appropriate honest. So
Yeah.
mummy's a dancer, or mummy does massages. Mummy, is an entertainer.
Yeah.
Like there's so many ways that you can say it that isn't, explicit. And then
Hmm.
because as they get older, and they also hear me all the time on Zoom calls or phone calls, and they see me planning events and coordinating things and sex industry this and sex industry that, and mom's a sex worker activist, and that's all very mainstream in our house. So
Yeah.
that doesn't really affect them. I think at some point they put two and two together of what mom meant when she said she was a dancer or a stripper or whatever, and then it comes together. But it's not something that we need to sit down and talk about, or at least so far, my children haven't. Like I've tried to get it out with have it out with my 24-year-old daughter. I even have some old footage where she was interviewed, but asking her questions, and it was just normal for her.
Yeah.
She appreciated that she had a mother that she could talk to about anything. And I believe that being in this industry really helped me to want to create an environment for my children very different from the one that I grew up in. And whereas I grew up in an authoritarian type of household, very top down,
Yeah.
But with my children, I've tried to treat them very much as equals as much as I can. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
depending
They're
on their age,
still
like,
kids in a,
yeah, they're
yeah.
kids. Like, I'm still a mother. Like, people say you shouldn't be your child's friend, you should be their parent. And I think you should be both
Hmm.
because I think that you should be their parent to the extent that you make sure that they don't, that they survive and they eat healthy and they,
Yeah.
have their needs met and don't, get into crazy trouble because you're being absent or you're not being a parent. But I also think that you should be their friend. So if they make a mistake or if they um, have a problem, you don't tell your friend, like after they got unexpectedly pregnant that they're a effing idiot and how dare they, and
Right.
like and demean them and insult them and rage out on them. Or if they do something to disappoint you, you don't call them selfish and call them names. You don't do that to your friends. So why do we do that to our children?
I
Why
like that. Yeah. I
why do
like
we
that.
shame them
Yeah. That
into like
distinguish
obedience?
the distinguishing of like, would you ever say that to your best friend?
Hmm.
No. Or someone that you love and care about? No. But like, obviously, sorry, buddy, you got to eat the broccoli. Like that's what's for
Yeah.
dinner. Eat that, like I would
Yeah.
probably also never tell my friend that she needed to eat the broccoli, but like that's fine. I would also
Yeah.
treat her with kindness.
But
So
like, okay, so let's say the broccoli situation. You're not going to take the broccoli and force it into your child's mouth and shove it down or anything.
right,
Like you're going to strongly encourage them to eat broccoli, and you might even strongly encourage your friend to do other healthy things that you know are good for them.
exactly.
But you're
Yeah.
not going to force them. You're not going to punish them if they don't do it. And so then your child, or just like your friend, knows that they can come to you and talk to you, but also they start to develop the ability to make decisions for themselves and feel confident in the decisions that they make their own mistakes and be able to get through those mistakes without feeling like it's the end of the world because they have mom there saying, it's a mistake. It's not the worst mistake. It's not even close to some of the worst mistakes I've ever
Yeah.
made. And that's the other thing too. Like I thought, how can I judge my kids for anything when they have never done some of the really worst things I've done? My kids, they haven't lived long enough to do those things yet.
Yeah,
So
we're
I
all
know,
fallible. We're
right?
all
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
beings. Like I think you being such a safe space for them is important because that's going to give them that same, like I think you also know what it feels like to be deeply empowered and like you want your kids to all have an
Mhm.
experience just like that. Um, but yeah, I was just kind of curious. I mean, the way you're talking, I talk how I talk to my son about my job.
Yeah.
It's the job. It's your job. It's what you do.
Yeah.
It's period. Let's not make
Hmm.
this some
You don't say,
weird
well,
thing.
first I turn on the machine and then I put in the microphone and then, like, and I don't say, well, first I pull out the massage oil.
Yeah.
Like,
Step by step. Yeah, my son's almost two, so he still just like he likes
doesn't even get it.
dinosaurs and like
Yeah.
whatever. But um that a soft space to land, I think, is
Mhm.
like such a vibe that you give me of like
Mhm.
I'm here and like sometimes you got to give them the tough love and sometimes you have to help them through the hard things, but
Mhm.
I think that shows strength and that's an example of that
I do
strength.
that
And
with my friends too, though, and sometimes they don't like it.
yeah,
And I'm pretty straight with them. I've had it more than once where I really want to talk to you, but I'm worried you're going to get mad at me, or I'm worried you're going to be mean to me. And I'm like, really? That's what you think when I'm giving it to you straight? I think you think I'm being mean. Oh my gosh, maybe
you're
I
just a
am mean to my
brat.
kids.
No, I am sure you are not. But another thing that I really wanted to talk about, because I know that you've sort of referenced this, is how the views on your body and your body image and how that's
Mhm.
been affected because you were in a
Yeah.
profession where your body was a massive part of your job.
Mhm.
And how that's kind of developed and changed. How's that looked?
That's such an awesome question. I love that question. When I started dancing at the age of 23, I had very small breasts, like really small. Like I didn't have a line underneath. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like from a little bit of boob cleavage or whatever, or under boob. I didn't have under boob.
yeah,
And that's how small my breasts were. And becoming an exotic dancer and seeing a lot of other dancers with small breasts, just like mine, and having an audience clapping for me and men willing to pay money to watch me dance and to tip me, all of that really built up my confidence in my body. And there's occasionally guys like, buy some boobs, or, you always get some drunk idiot that's saying ignorant stuff to whoever.
yeah,
And that did happen. I'm not going to say it didn't, but it didn't really affect me because I had so much positive feedback, constant positive feedback about my body that the odd rude comment would, sting a little, but that was it. And so that was an interesting thing that I didn't expect to happen when I got into the sex industry because you're told it's so degrading, it's so disempowering. I thought maybe I would become more insecure than I was, but I didn't.
yeah,
I became more confident. And then as the years went on, of course, I had babies and then I would go back to dancing. So now my belly button doesn't even look the same. Like my nipples are
yeah.
different colors.
Rest in
Yeah.
peace to the belly
I've got like the,
button.
the the stretch marks on the boobs and the ass, like everything's changed, even if it's mostly gone back, it's changed, it's different. And so as women, I think we're constantly going through changes of our bodies. And so now if we're lucky and we finally accept our body at some point, then it changes. And now we got to accept a new body all over again, and then as we age, same thing. And, but I've kind of gone through even more than just the natural aspects of body changes because in 2012, I had to have an emergency surgery to remove 75% of my large intestine.
Oh.
And that surgery left me with really deep, really noticeable, ugly ass scars all the way down my stomach and across my stomach and no belly button. And so that immediately put a stop to me dancing because
Mm-hmm.
in the strip clubs, well, first of all, even if the strip clubs were okay having someone that scarred up dance, I was not confident enough. I was very insecure about my
Mm-hmm.
scars. It was devastating for me, especially because I'd always had this. I love that was one of my assets that I felt so proud of when I was a dancer. I had like such a nice stomach. I had a big, beautiful tattoo on my stomach. I loved my stomach. So now I hated my stomach.
Yeah. And
And for a
that's
long
tough because
time,
it took
yeah.
away that thing. It took away your most favorite part. I mean,
Yeah,
it
and I
saved your
couldn't even
life,
yeah.
yes, but
And I couldn't even have sex without a shirt for a while, like wearing
mhm.
a shirt. And it wasn't to hide my boobs because I was totally comfortable with my boobs. It was my scars. I was just so insecure about my scars for so long. And and what ended up happening is first I went back to the strip clubs for work because I needed work. And I thought, well, I can't strip anymore, but I could do massages. And I
Mhm.
wasn't really sure because at that time I was having arthritis issues in my hands. I didn't know if I'd be able to do it, but I was able to do it and just not work on the nights that I couldn't. And that's part of having a disability is you need a job that you're not going to get fired. You need a job that if you can't show up, it's okay. And so working in the sex industry offered me that a job that I could work when I was well enough to work. And I went back to the strip clubs and I started just doing neck massages.
There
And
you
so the
go.
guys would be watching the show and they'd pay me, $20 for 3 songs and I'd massage them and, hug them a little bit and give them a little bit of love. And it was actually quite a rewarding job. And I hustle. I hustle good. So
I can tell. I
yeah, I
feel
make good
like,
money, and like
yeah.
you said, I think I give off this feeling to I've been told before as well that people feel safe with me and to talk to me and like people never have to worry about saying the wrong thing or making a mistake with me because I'll be like, oh man, don't worry about it. I know what you
Yeah.
were trying to say, you know, or whatever.
Yeah. And
Like
that
it,
you got to
yeah.
pivot. You got to pivot.
Hmm.
Like one something that like I definitely didn't understand, and I'm so glad that you've shared this with me is like I definitely had preconceived notions that there's only one way to do it. And
Hmm.
like if you break a leg, if something happens with your physical body, there's like no room to pivot. And that's
Hmm.
not true.
Yeah.
That's now I'm like,
It
whoa.
gets deeper than that. Like my mind was blown just a few months ago because after all of my surgeries in 2012, it was kind of a little bit of a roller coaster with my gastrointestinal issues over the years, but they turned a lot worse in recent years and came to a head last year. And I was faced again with a surgeon and a surgery. And I was basically told that I had two options. I could get an ileostomy or an ileostomy. But
Yeah.
basically, I could get a temporary ileostomy, which is a poop bag on the outside
Yep.
of my body, on my stomach. And then they could try to repair the damage that's been done to my diseased intestine and then try again to reconnect. And that this would mean multiple surgeries, like years of recovery and pain and being in and out of the medical system. Or I could get one permanent ileostomy and hopefully that heals the issues that I was having and I wouldn't have to be constantly in and out of the medical system over the next few years. So I went with that option and I did decide to finally get a permanent
Okay.
ileostomy. Yes.
Yeah.
And then I thought,
Okay.
so and just in the last few years before I got this ostomy, I had finally decided this is the last time I'm coming back to the adult entertainment industry. I'm never going to leave it again. I just decided. I was like, I was tired of jobs that I couldn't, make ends meet, couldn't send my kids to activities, couldn't keep them because I would get fired because I would get sick and I couldn't work. I had one job where my boss was so understanding. But when I called to tell her, listen, I'm going to quit because this is just ridiculous, calling in sick all the time. She said, I'm glad that you've made that decision because looking at your work, you've only been here for like 40% of your shifts. And I was like, you
But
know?
that's you like you said, you're a hustler. You don't like being idle. Like that
Hmm.
to you is probably really challenging to be
Oh,
your body's failing you, and that
yes.
sucks. Like
Mm.
it just sucks. And I'm glad that you made that decision that was right for you. As
Mhm.
you were speaking, I'm like, I hope she went with the permanent. I hope she went with the permanent. Like,
Yes.
I went with the
Yes.
permanent because like thinking about having to be in and out of the medical system so
Mhm.
much versus one time. I mean, there's
Mm.
trade-offs, obviously. And so now you are living with an ostomy. How
Yes.
has that impacted like what
Yeah.
how
Well,
you're
I thought it was going to really, really devastate my work. And I don't really know yet what, what the full impact it's going to have on my massage work because I haven't gone back to massage since my surgery yet because it's a long recovery. It
yeah.
takes a while for the incisions to heal. It's very, very weird. Like they're on like I have like incisions on my butt that take forever to heal because that's how you sit.
Yeah. Well,
So
how I'm
yeah,
like,
that's annoying.
isn't it interesting? And
Yeah,
you're
well,
getting
because
used
they removed
to,
my intestine, my large intestine, and then now my small intestine sticks out of my stomach, and
yeah.
that's where my stoma is, and they just sewed up my butt.
Oh,
They
so
call
you
it
don't have,
Barbie butt, Barbie butt.
that's
Isn't
amazing.
that awesome?
And you're also getting used to like literally
Mhm.
pooping a different way,
Yes.
like figuring out something that
Hmm.
you did for what, 49 years one
Yes.
way, having to now
Mhm.
do it another. That's a
Totally.
lot. It's a lot.
It was scary. It was scary, but
Yeah.
the biggest, scariest part of it for me was that I didn't think that people would find me beautiful anymore. I
Mm,
didn't think that my body would be sexy anymore. I thought that I was going to lose my sexual beauty or attraction and that I wouldn't be able to do my massages. So sensual massage is just like it's a sensual massage. There's no actual sex or anything that happens between me and my clients. But it's still like, get down to my
yeah.
panties and, there's lots of like skin to skin contact and hugging, naked hugging and that kind of thing. It's very for depending on who your provider is and depends on how the experience is. But for me, I like to give a very intimate, personal, loving, caring, energetic a massage experience where the person my hope is that when they walk out they feel like a weight is lifted. They feel like they're just like they're jello and they're just happy, and that's
Yeah.
my goal. And that's how I want people to feel when they walk out. So it's a very loving exchange and I'm proud of my work. But I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to work anymore. And I started telling all of my clients, I'm going to be going for surgery and I am getting a permanent ostomy. And I was shocked because really I was saying goodbye to my clients. And I was shocked by how many of them said, uh, well, I know this is very upsetting for you, and I would understand if you don't want to give massages anymore afterwards. But if you decide that you do still want to give them, please let me know because I will still continue to come and see you. And since I've been off work, I've gotten, you know, consistently gotten messages from my regulars saying, when you coming back? When you
We
coming back?
miss you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they don't give a shit about my ostomy.
They don't give a shit about where your shit's coming from. They just
Exactly.
don't. They just
Exactly.
don't. But that's connection. That is building a connection. And clearly, so many people, you seem to have a lot of regulars. You seem to have a lot of people
Mhm.
that you've known probably and they've known you. Like, I feel like
Well, I thought I was going to have to quit, but it was my community who said to me, "Why do you have to quit?" They pointed out another sex worker who is, she's on Twitter. She calls herself that porn star with an ostomy, and so she does like OnlyFans and
Yeah.
adult
Yes.
film work with an ostomy, and she's also a disability advocate. So when I found her, that was very, very inspiring and empowering for me. And then the reaction that I had from my clients was the next thing. And then that's when I realized that I'd, and you'd think you learned this lesson already, but then you go through something like this, and I learned it all over again that the outside of my body is really not that important,
Hmm.
that I am still beautiful, even with my flaws, my scars, my ostomy, my wrinkles, my age, everything. I'm beauty. I'm beautiful in a different way now than I was when I was 23, but I'm still beautiful.
As we should
And
be. We shouldn't be
yeah.
the same person as we
Hmm.
were when we were 23. Like if you are, I feel like that's actually concerning because it means
Hmm.
you haven't grown. You haven't you haven't done anything since you were
I
23? Like
know.
nothing's happened to you and you've experienced nothing. Like that's
Mhm.
actually kind of a sad life if you think about it. Like I think
Yeah.
we wear, whether it's a physical scar or emotional ones, like we wear
Mhm.
that as we get older and they all teach us
Yes.
something.
They do. We
And
become hopefully a better person. And there's one of two ways it can go. We can become bitter and become victims. And that's not to put people down who are still stuck there, because I was stuck there and I have been stuck there. And it's a process to go through that part of each difficult situation that we encounter. But you get better at it and better at it. Each time you get up and bounce back from a shitty, difficult situation, you realize how strong you are. And then
mhm,
you know in the next situation that you're going to be able to get through it. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I've learned, not just from saying, okay, you know what, I'm broke, so I'm going to try being a stripper.
yeah.
Or, you know what, I can't keep a job anymore. So even though my entire society could turn on me, I'm going to try doing sensual massage and give my family and myself a better quality of life. Or I'm going to change my body with an ostomy, and then I'm going to take sexy pictures showing it and share them on the internet.
Things you probably never thought you would do. Like it's if at 23 you could have looked forward to where you are now, you'd have been like, what?
No, I
What?
would never have thought that. And I was
What?
also very jaded, negative,
Yeah.
like chip on my shoulder at 23. And now I just love everybody. And
You are light in like human form, which has just been the most delightful thing to be able to chat with you. So what do you think is maybe like next for you? Like what do you think, anything big on your docket for goals? Like what do we think is what do you want? What
I
do you
mean, I love writing books. That's my big thing. I have
Yeah.
so many books. I'm writing under a pseudonym. I'm writing uh like teen fantasy fiction books, with mermaids and dragons and all that. So that's something I love doing. And I have a bunch of other books I want to write. My memoir is coming out in October of my experiences as an adult entertainer. So I feel like everything that I've been through, at least so far, the reason, how there's a reason for everything. I feel like the reason for me is that my my calling is to try and decrease division in society.
hmm
And not just between adult entertainers and the rest of society, but just by hoping that my story can help people just to challenge their beliefs a little bit, open their minds a little bit, and accept all people a little more, and that's why I really, really loved, and that resonated with me, the name of your podcast, because
Yeah.
welcome to my tent. Like, share your voice with me. Tell me, why do you think those things that I think are so ridiculous? I
Or
want
like
to know.
I could have never gotten this much insight. What I know or knew, now I know so much more. What I knew was what they show on TV.
Mhm.
Like, and that's
Not the
not
truth.
accurate. That's not it. And I think we all know those things. Like that's, a television show, but it's really hard when there's not a lot of voices out here doing
Yes.
what you do, or even like I talked to a brain surgeon. Like I don't know what it's like
Oh
to
my
do
God, I
brain.
loved that interview. I
Yeah,
loved
isn't
that
it fun?
interview. It was so
Uh,
good. It was fascinating. The brain surgeon? Yeah, I
right?
listened to that one.
It's
It
just
was
like
fascinating.
my dad was a big his sort of pertained more to business. He owned a business for a long time, and his was like I can have a general understanding. I'm a smart guy, but like I'm never going to be the smartest in the room for everything. And like I need to invite people into my tent that
Hmm.
I don't know how to code. I don't know how to fix software. I don't know how to do this. Like, and I will willingly admit I'm not the smartest person in this room. And I think he was such a big tent kind of guy that like he was
Hmm.
always surrounded by very fascinating people.
That sounds
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, and he died a couple years or 4 years ago now, which is crazy. And so I was thinking about this
Mm.
name for the podcast, and I was like, I don't really have a niche for this podcast. I want just like anyone and everyone that's
Hmm.
cool to come on. And then I was like, well, why don't I just, that's the niche. Anyone that has a cool story that's not mine. Cause like, yeah, I have my own cool story too. You know, I've experienced plenty of things in my life, but like,
Hmm.
that's where it all came from. And I was like, is this gonna work? And then I'm like, well, yes, people are loving the episode, but selfishly, I get to then talk to amazing people.
I
So,
know. I'm starting a podcast too, and I just did my first interview yesterday. And I
yay.
love that I get to ask the questions that I want to know the answer. It's
It's
so
like such
fun.
a self-fulfilling, yeah, like thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, you'll give me an hour of your time to just tell me like the tea. I feel like I get all the
Hmm.
tea from all the people. So it's
Yeah.
been really, really fun, and listeners too have been really grateful. Um, and I'm really excited for this one to come out for because I think a lot of people are scared to to learn about something like this. They just
Hmm.
don't know. It's an intimidating word. It's an intimidating thing.
Yes.
Um, and so I'm really excited for this one to come out and for people.
Me too. And let me know if you get any feedback or
I
if people
will,
have
yes.
questions, send them my
Of
way.
course, I will definitely keep you posted, but I appreciate you so,
Thanks.
so much giving me 60 minutes of your time. You are such, literally, you're in yellow, which I think also makes it better, just like sunshine, light, in human form. So, Annie, I appreciate you
Thank
so,
you.
so much. Um, and I'm excited for everyone to hear all about Annie Temple. Oh, also, where can people find you? That's a big thing. Tell
Yes, you can
everyone.
find me at annietemple.com. And please come and find me. And definitely please like and share and subscribe to my content
And
and
your
help me out.
podcast and
Yes.
your new podcast. Yes. And
Yeah.
I'll share this all too um, for everyone. But Annie, I adore you. This was
Thank
so,
you.
so
I
fun. Thank
enjoyed
you.
this. Do it
All
again
right.
sometime.
Yes. All right. Thank you.